Sift. Attention.
ShelterPetProject.org. Remember, adopt.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/sift. That's audibletrial.com/sift. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from on your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. I highly recommend it. You're listening to an audio signal that just happens to be my voice right now. And as you're listening to the signal, your brain's asking itself these questions.
Do I care about it? Do I really need to pay attention to it?
This is Sift. I'm Bishop Sand. Today we'll be talking about attention, and we'll bring it to you in two parts. Part 1, definition with correlates. Part 2, bottom up but top down. The other voice you'll hear today is from Jackie Gottlieb.
I'm a neuroscientist. I work at Columbia University.
This is part 1 in which we define the neural correlate of attention and the distinction between attention and learning.
Correlation is no proof.
We begin with an idea that you're probably familiar with. Namely, you're churning over information that you're not directly aware of. Some might like to call it something like the unconscious or subconscious. Take, for example, the information that's coming into your eyes right now.
Neurons have a constant low-level activity because they receive constant visual information. Every now and again, a signal will become stronger than the rest. And you can see it. It's as if one signal wins out, and it can be very briefly. And then you move on to another signal. And then you move on to another signal. And so that's the neural correlate of selection.
So to give a sort of working definition for attention, just think of it as a mechanism
that selects trains of thought. But mostly we look at selecting sensory stimuli for in-depth processing and for linking them with action.
Now, attention is very similar to learning, but with one caveat.
Yes, exactly. So for attention, the selection can be very transient, right? I can shift my attention several times a second. I think when we talk about learning, attention becomes a bit more permanent because there's a pattern that's reinforced and it stays there and it's stored in your brain.
This is part 2 in which we learn what every educator and what every advertiser wants to know. What drives our attention?
So that's a very complicated question to which we have very few answers, strikingly, drives the selection. There are a number of factors. The answer will be a number of different processes. So some of them are simply what we call bottom-up, which means they're dictated by the external world. So if if there were an ambulance starting to wail on the street, we would just attend to it, just because it's a strong stimulus. If somebody hits you with a hammer on the head, you're going to attend to it. And you probably will remember it as well, whether you want to or not, okay? Right. So strong and contrasting signals that stand out from their environment, they cause learning and attention.
Another process that drives attention is a more top-down kind of process. It's a little complicated, so stay with me here. First, you have to be doing something, some kind of task. And at least on some level,
you have to know the task.
Which means you have some understanding of what the goals of your task are, what the future is going to be like, and what information you need to look for. So then, with this understanding of your task, you seek out information relevant to it.
So you have to kind of plan ahead.
So in other words, your attention's driven by information that's relevant to your task that you're performing. Let me give an example. Say that you're in a conversation with somebody. You naturally look at their face. You could even say your attention is driven to their face. Now, why do you do that?
Because you say, okay, how informative that stimulus is.
Right. And a person's face is incredibly informative when you're talking to them. It tells you about their emotional state. It tells you about the meaning of what they're saying.
Right.
So it's really no surprise how the brain must derive a signal that says something like, attend to the face. Because you know that if you attend to the face, then you'll know the emotion that's going on in this conversation, and then you'll know how to respond, etc. And you wouldn't have gotten the emotional information or know how to respond in a conversation if you had been, say, staring out the window. It seems so simple when you explain it like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems, yes, it does seem so simple. And, conceptually, it's not that now... but we're nowhere near figuring out all these advanced planning things, right? How do you have the prior knowledge? So you have to have the prior knowledge. You have to use it to plan. You have to determine that this is based on all this planning. You determine, okay, this is an interesting signal. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to attend to it. I'm going to analyze it. Then I'm going to move on to the next step. I'm going to attend to another signal, and so on and so forth. Okay, we can just say this is kind of how it has to happen. This is the stage where we're at. Hey, look at this. People up to now haven't even asked these questions. So I'm sort of at the stage where I say, hey, look at this. We're missing a whole bunch of interesting questions.
Special thanks to Jackie Gottlieb over at Columbia University for her help on this episode. And thanks to Eric Tokle. That's Tokle. His music is playing right now by his new album, From There Is No Teenage Love. It's available at Bandcamp. You can follow Sift on SoundCloud, Facebook, iTunes, Stitcher, and our website, siftpodcast.com. I'm Bishop Sand. Thanks for listening.
This is Radio Newark.
Another hockey season over. Let's check.
The Twin Paradox, also on Sift.
By the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
This is Sift.
Sure.
Paradoxes.
I'm Aaron Sand. Today, we're going to start with a phone call home.
Good morning.
Hi, Mom. How you doing? Barry here.
Barry, just wait till I get your dad.
Sure.
Hello. Oh, there he is.
Hi, Dad. How you doing?
I have to wait. I got a phone. Okay, Mother's calling and I couldn't hear what you were saying.
All right. I'm teaching relativity this week,
Yeah?
and I remember that you had a limerick about the time traveler.
Yes. There was a young lady named Dwight who could travel much faster than light. She departed one day in a relative way and returned home the previous night.
That's the one.
Oh, do you want to write it down now?
No, I think we've pretty much got it.
Have you?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thanks for your help.
Okay. Love you.
Bye now.
So cute.
So typical, right? So basic.
In the next two short episodes, we're going to be going as deeply as we can into physics paradoxes and see where that leads us. We'll first look at the twin paradox again in a little bit more detail and use the help of a couple of physics teachers.
Hi, my name's Barry. I teach physics at the Dwight School.
I'm Stefan Riemersma. I am a physics teacher at Midwood High School.
And a high school student.
Hello, I'm Nikki. I'm a 12th grader at the Dwight School.
To tell the story.
Believe it or not, if I was floating through space and you were, say, hanging out and standing still in space, you would see me go by. Whoosh. Huh? But I would feel like I was just standing still in space, in fact, and I'd see you float by me. Make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And if we're far away from anything big, then we don't have anything to compare it to, so we can't really settle the argument over who's standing still, who's moving. We have to just agree that we're moving relative to each other.
Okay, well that makes sense, yeah.
Simple, right?
Yeah.
All right. Here's the weird thing. If you were moving past me really, really fast, like say 90% of the speed of light, and you had a big wristwatch on, and I had a big wristwatch on, I would see you go by, and you would see me go by, right? We remember that. But if I looked at your watch, I would see your watch go tick, 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 really lazy, really slow. And you wouldn't believe what you'd see on my watch. You have to see the same thing, because I'm just moving relative to you. You'd see my watch running really slowly. Kind of weird, right? There's no reason for that to make sense.
Yeah.
But it happened.
Okay, then, yeah, I don't particularly get it, but...
I don't get it. But I've repeated it enough times that I remembered it. It's quite a simple proof. You just need the Pythagorean theorem to do the math. But we don't need to worry about that now.
The theory of special relativity says that when anything is moving with respect to you, all processes run slower. And this is a measurable effect.
Taking, say, watches and put them up in space and put them on the space shuttle, say, and then the space shuttle goes around and around and around. That's at some speed, which is not quite the speed. I mean, not even close to the speed of light. But still, when they compare the clocks again, the clock on the space shuttle
run at a different rate than the clocks down here on Earth
by maybe 1,000th of a second or something. Nevertheless, it's measurable.
Now we're going to come up to this thing called the twin paradox. It's not really a paradox, but it seems like one at first. Ready for this?
Sure.
Two twins are born. Their names are Nikki and Jen. Cute little baby girls.
Okay.
And you are going in a rocket ship for a big, long journey. 20 years you're going to be gone.
All right.
Jen's going to miss you. And your rocket takes off in the year 2010, goes somewhere, and turns around and comes back. Your rocket lands on Earth, and Jen says it's 2030. She waits for you to land, and your rocket lands, and you get out and you say, that's funny. It's only 2025 on my calendar. And you look young, and she looks like she's aged. And that's crazy, because we've already agreed. What's crazy about that?
Well, it's crazy because...
Each twin, if they were looking at the other twin's watch, would see the slowing. You look at her watch and say, okay, tick, 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 1 second, 1 second. They would look at the other person's watch and say, tick, tick, tick. So from that point of view, while that's going on, while they're both moving at the same speed relative to each other, both of them see the other person's clock operating more slowly.
Whatever's happening to your watch should happen to my watch.
When they come back, they should see exactly the same times for each of the watches.
Meaning that each twin would see their sister as younger than they were. But
how can this be mutual?
That's the paradox.
What one realizes quickly is that the situation isn't symmetrical. to bring these guys back together again, one of them has to accelerate, and the resolution has to be somehow part of that asymmetry.
And that's when it all occurs. Right there is during the acceleration part.
To understand why acceleration really matters when you're considering how time gets dilated, it helps to think about a strobe, those strobe lights. And picture giving off this regular frequency, and the strobe is broadcasting really bright light flashes out into space. And this accelerating twin, who's accelerating away from Earth, is receiving those light flashes as well. And think about how they would be received by the twin in the spaceship. Would they be closer together? Would they be farther away, or would they be the same?
They would arrive at the spaceship at very close time intervals.
So during this acceleration process, it would appear to the twin inside the rocket ship the time is going faster on Earth. And from our perspective on Earth, time is going slower for the astronaut.
The acceleration slows down the astronaut's clock. That's it. It's a pain in the astronaut.
Funny.
I use that whenever I get... Enough said. Well, we just about killed that paradox right away.
It seems like this should just be something that's forgotten because it's wrong. It's an apparent paradox. It's something that seems like a puzzle, but it's really not a puzzle. And why do people still talk about it?
Relativity is not very intuitive. Yeah. It's not something it's common in our everyday experience. I think Brian Greene said if we had a situation where people were normally traveling near the speed of light, and then in the ships, and they'd be all jetting around, all be operating on different times, then it would become more intuitive. But right now, it's just not part of our common everyday experience.
That's it for this SIF short. Thanks to our guests.
Hi, my name's Barry. I teach physics at the Dwight School.
I'm Stefan Riemersma. I am a physics teacher at Midwood High School.
Hello, I'm Nikki. I'm a 12th grader at the Dwight School.
Well, my name is Jay Lawrence. I've been a professor of physics at Dartmouth for many years.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, and iTunes, or you can visit sifpodcast.com. I'm Aaron Sand. Thanks for listening.
Good.
Good.
Test on Tuesday.
If you've got a story to tell, I'd like to hear you on the radio. Email Steve at